You didn't just survive, you evolved. There comes a moment after relationship trauma when you recognize that something profound has happened inside you. You are no longer the same woman who entered that relationship, nor are you simply the woman who walked away from it. The experiences that once threatened to break you have instead reshaped you. Not because pain is inherently noble or transformative, but because of the choices you made after the pain arrived. You chose to face it rather than bury it. You chose to ask difficult questions instead of pretending everything was fine. Most importantly, you chose healing over hopelessness. That decision, repeated over countless ordinary days, has quietly created a version of yourself that is wiser, stronger, and more deeply connected to what truly matters. Many people imagine healing as returning to the person they were before the relationship began. Yet genuine healing rarely works that way. Life does not move backward, and neither do we. The woman who survives betrayal, emotional neglect, chronic invalidation, manipulation, or years of loneliness inside a relationship cannot simply erase those experiences. Instead, she gradually becomes someone who carries those experiences differently. What once felt like unbearable weight slowly becomes wisdom. What once felt like shame becomes compassion. What once felt like loss becomes clarity. Healing is not about recovering your old identity. It is about discovering the truest version of yourself beneath everything that tried to convince you that you were not enough. Perhaps one of the greatest surprises along the healing journey is realizing that your suffering has expanded your capacity to understand others. You never wished for the sleepless nights, the endless self-questioning, or the exhausting effort of trying to make sense of someone else's behavior. Yet those very experiences taught you to recognize invisible pain in other people. You became slower to judge because you know how easy it is for someone to smile while silently carrying tremendous burdens. You became quicker to listen because you understand what it feels like to long for someone to simply hear you without trying to fix or dismiss your experience. Instead of hardening your heart, your suffering deepened it. You learned that kindness often matters most when no one else can see the battle another person is fighting. One of the most liberating changes that healing brings is the gradual shift from seeking external validation to trusting your own inner voice. There may have been a time when your emotional well-being depended almost entirely upon someone else's approval. A kind word could lift your spirits, while criticism or emotional distance could leave you questioning your worth. You may have spent years trying to predict another person's moods, hoping that if you said the right thing or did enough to keep the peace, everything would finally feel safe. Over time, however, something remarkable began to happen. You realized that peace built upon another person's unpredictable responses could never become lasting peace. Real stability had to come from within. As your confidence grew, you discovered that you no longer needed everyone to understand your choices in order to trust them yourself. You learned that disappointing someone does not automatically make you a disappointment. You discovered that saying no is not an act of selfishness, but an act of self-respect. Little by little, you stopped handing other people the authority to define your value. Alongside this growing confidence came a healthier understanding of boundaries. In the past, boundaries may have felt uncomfortable because you associated them with rejection, conflict, or guilt. You may have believed that loving people meant endlessly accommodating them, sacrificing your own needs, or tolerating behavior that slowly diminished your sense of self. Healing gently challenged those beliefs. You began to understand that healthy boundaries are not walls designed to keep love away. They are guidelines that allow love to flourish without destroying the people involved. You realize that saying yes to everyone eventually became saying no to yourself, and that constant self-sacrifice often produced resentment rather than genuine generosity. Protecting your emotional well-being no longer feels like something that requires an apology. Instead, it has become one of the ways you honor both yourself and those who truly love you. Another profound transformation occurred as you slowly learned to trust your own body again. Relationship trauma often teaches women to doubt their instincts. They ignore uncomfortable feelings, explain away obvious warning signs, or convince themselves that if they simply become more patient or understanding, things will improve. Healing reverses that pattern. Instead of dismissing your physical responses, you began paying attention to them. Tightness in your chest, persistent anxiety, chronic confusion, or a sense that something simply was not right became valuable information rather than emotions to suppress. You learned that your nervous system often notices danger long before your rational mind can explain it. At the same time, you discovered that genuine emotional safety feels remarkably different from the intense highs and lows that once seemed exciting. Healthy love does not constantly activate fear or uncertainty. More often, it feels peaceful, consistent, and quietly reassuring. Your body, once overwhelmed by chronic stress, gradually became a trustworthy guide once again. Perhaps one of the deepest emotional shifts involved your understanding of love itself. Before healing, it may have been easy to believe that another person held the missing pieces of your happiness. Relationships sometimes become unconscious attempts to fill emotional emptiness, to earn worthiness, or to prove that we are finally enough. As healing progressed, however, your perspective changed. Instead of searching for someone to complete you, you became committed to becoming whole yourself. Love transformed from something you desperately needed into something you freely chose to share. Rather than asking who might rescue you from loneliness, you began asking who could walk beside the healthy, authentic woman you were becoming. That quiet change in perspective altered every future relationship because your identity was no longer dependent upon someone else's ability to validate it. Many women also discover that relationship trauma profoundly deepens their spiritual lives. Pain has a way of stripping away everything superficial and forcing us to confront the deepest questions of identity, purpose, forgiveness, and hope. Whether your faith is rooted in God, prayer, quiet contemplation, nature, or a growing awareness that life contains meaning beyond immediate circumstances, suffering often becomes the doorway through which genuine spiritual maturity emerges. Instead of asking why painful experiences happened, you may have gradually begun asking who you were becoming because of them. That single shift changes everything. Spiritual growth is no longer about avoiding suffering, but about allowing even painful seasons to shape your character with greater humility, wisdom, patience, and compassion. You begin trusting that growth often occurs quietly beneath the surface long before anyone else can recognize it. One unexpected milestone in healing arrives when you realize that being alone no longer frightens you. There was likely a time when solitude felt unbearable because it seemed to confirm every fear of abandonment or rejection. Yet somewhere along the journey, your relationship with yourself began to change. You rediscovered interests that had been neglected. You laughed more easily. Friendships became richer. Moments of quiet became opportunities for reflection instead of reminders of loneliness. You discovered that your own company could actually bring peace. This does not mean you stopped valuing close relationships. Rather, it means you no longer needed another person to rescue you from yourself. Ironically, this growing sense of wholeness often creates the healthiest foundation for future relationships, because love is no longer driven by desperation, but by mutual respect and genuine companionship. The strength you now carry may not resemble the strength you once imagined. It is not loud or aggressive. It does not require proving anything to anyone. Instead, it appears in quieter ways. It is found in your ability to remain compassionate without becoming naive. It is evident in your willingness to forgive while still remembering the lessons your experiences taught you. It is reflected in your hopefulness, which no longer depends upon ignoring reality, but grows from knowing that even difficult seasons eventually pass. Your confidence is no longer built upon avoiding hardship. It rests upon the undeniable evidence that you have already survived what once seemed impossible and emerged with your heart still capable of loving wisely. Perhaps the most meaningful gift of your healing is that your story now has the power to become someone else's hope. Someday, another woman will sit across from you, convinced that she is disappearing inside a painful relationship. She will believe that no one could possibly understand the confusion, grief, exhaustion, or self-doubt she feels. Without needing perfect words or dramatic speeches, you will simply tell her the truth. You have been where she is. Those simple words will carry extraordinary weight because they come from lived experience rather than theory. Your scars will quietly become evidence that healing is possible. Your peace will demonstrate that life exists beyond survival. Your wisdom will offer reassurance that the darkest chapters of a person's story do not have to become the final ones. When you look back today, you may still wish that some experiences had never happened. Healing does not require pretending that trauma was somehow good or necessary. Pain is still painful, and loss is still loss. Yet you can also recognize that your response to those experiences revealed strengths you never knew you possessed. You became stronger not because trauma automatically produces strength, but because you consistently chose courage over despair, truth over denial, growth over bitterness, and hope over resignation. Those choices slowly reshaped your life from the inside out. Today you stand as a woman who has not merely survived difficult relationships, but has evolved through them. Your past is still part of your story, but it no longer controls the narrative. It has become one chapter in a much larger journey marked by resilience, emotional maturity, spiritual depth, and a growing capacity to love both yourself and others with wisdom rather than fear. That transformation may be the greatest victory of all. The circumstances that once threatened to define your future have instead become the foundation upon which you continue building a life filled with authenticity, peace, and quiet strength.
Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.